So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sushil from Edwise International. The floor is yours. Thank you, Sushil.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian, for that wonderful introduction. And I thank our sponsors. And welcome to everybody. I've seen that we have about 50 people already in here. Nice to meet people, friends of mine, who we've not met for some time. And I see that we have a good balance of people from India as well as from the US. So I'll start off. Quick introduction. As most of you all know, I'm the founding director of Edwise International and based out of Mumbai, India, presenting on this topic on how education will pan out, international education recruitment will pan out post the pandemic. Just a moment. Yeah. So a quick intro on Edwise. We are one of India's first agencies, started in 91. Team of about 400 staff, 23 offices across India, an extension national network with a wonderful footprint. And we recruit to several popular destinations, notably USA, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, Ireland, Germany. So most often when I speak with a lot of knowledge about across markets and align it towards the interest of agenda for today for the US market. So some things that we learned, or at least I would say I learned from the pandemic, is that students are not afraid to travel. We knew that the pandemic was more scary for those who are senior in age, and students are not really worried. So as soon as doors open, whichever country, they decided to fly, irrespective of what the flight ticket prices were. So expensive flight tickets are definitely not a barrier. And they did all they could to get onto the countries or campuses. Even when the institutions overseas said our campuses are closed or we have to learn online on our campus, they said, yes, students yet wanted to travel and get away from home. So, and another important thing I found out was that students will change destinations but will not take a gap year. That's very typical of a master's student out of India. They don't want to waste a year. They don't want to procrastinate. It's when it's time to start a program, it's time to start a program. And one very important thing that we all must have observed, that since people could not have boots on ground when they were traveling as they did earlier, the relationship with the agents mattered a lot, and more enrollments took place because of agents, through agents, and with the help of agents throughout the pandemic. Some other on-ground realities, that the demand for overseas education out of India is extremely strong and stays strong. This is from surveys conducted by two payment companies, which is Flywire and Western Union. Students want face-to-face classes. That's why they flew out as soon as they could. And they're very, very keen to experience campus life. I guess we all know that. However, there was a greater acceptance for online learning as they did not have an option. So I would like to say that an Indian student yet wants a face-to-face class, will accept a hybrid, but is not yet ready for an online program. Finance is an important parameter. And through the pandemic, students were very eager or expected to get tuition fee waivers. And some of their parents refused to fund the academic program because they did not see tuition fee waivers. They felt online education is not the same as face-to-face in class, and that they should not pay the same price. Also, families were affected in India depending on which background they were and which industry they were. So there was an impact of finances on the livelihood and funds availability for international study with students from India. And students are very keen on post-study work benefits. Therefore, the countries that announced that even if you were studying online and on camp from India and not even traveling to the country where you study, you would yet get benefits of post-study work and credit towards your immigration options in the future. So these are important announcements made by Canada and UK and eventually Australia too, which helped students, make quick decisions and start programs online. So another learning which I find very unique to my company, or I guess maybe other face-to-face counseling, is students prefer face-to-face counseling, because when we were counseling students through the pandemic, we were all counseling them online. But when the offices opened, we saw students come in, and public transport was not open, and restrictions to how many people could be in the office, but yet students were very keen to come visit us in our offices. So some data of the business in the recent past, that's of 2018 to 2021, I found this interesting data from a research done by University of Victoria out of Australia by their institute called Mitchell Institute on campus. This is the sum of students as per their knowledge that have traveled out of India to the 5 main destinations. Sorry, the slide is just overlapping the name of the destinations, but they are USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These are the 5 dominant destinations out of India. And in the year October 18 to September 19, there were 257,000 plus students who fell down during the pandemic year. It moved up in the year which I would call following the main pandemic year, October 20 to 21, significantly moving up. And compared to pre-pandemic time of 18-19, compared to even what I would yet call pandemic time, there was a growth of 27% in students out of India. So we should see, I think, at least another 25% growth when we look at the same data compared to for the period October 21 till September 22. However, data for Nepal for the same period, even though I'm only going to be talking India, it's Shreya who's going to be talking about Nepal and Bangladesh later. Just found a snippet of information here that for Nepal over this period, the volume of students had fallen 42%. And one of the things I feel matters a lot here is the availability of vaccines, because India had the availability of vaccines and students were given priority for vaccination and they could travel abroad. Now, data was always depends where you get it and the sources. So there was a presentation by the Ministry of External Affairs of India in the Lok Sabha, and the data they have for 2019 is that 588,000 or 589,000 students left India to study, and this says for all destinations worldwide, not only the 5 destinations mentioned above. And that went down 55% to volume in 2020. I must say this data exactly reflects the business of my company. Whatever numbers I did in the calendar year 2019, I had a fall of 55% in 2020. So even though the two data don't totally match, there is some value I feel in this information. Which destinations were good and successful in 2020? Canada, UK, Ireland, and USA in that order. A lot of students traveled there. Although the US decisions, the visa offices opening and students got to travel, there was very little time for them to make the decision. So they didn't make it in as large numbers. But what was very important, as we all know, is the importance of Zoom, importance of customer relationship management softwares available with students and agencies, institutions and agencies. And what was important is quick decision making by certain governments on what they should do with regarding to policies of post-study work, travel, campus-based accommodation, campus-based learning, etc. So I think those who had good agile businesses, they managed to survive. Otherwise, a large part of the industry, agents as well as institutions, I think faced a really tough time. 2021, the same destinations had a large number of students coming, but I think UK did better than Canada in 2021. USA followed Canada, and then Ireland and Germany stepped in. But towards the middle of the year, we started seeing Zoom fatigue. We saw institutions working closely with agencies, but because they were not able to travel, they were really dependent on agencies. Agencies opened offices, but again, we had situations of sometimes offices are open, sometimes closed, again open in different cities. So there was a lot of change that we had to deal with all the time. A bit of data that I got, but I could not finally reference it. I can send it to someone. They published that Australia, the volume of students went down 62% during these 2 years, 20 and 21, and the volume of students in UK went up 174%. So it's, I mean, amazing that there was that much of growth in UK, and other markets probably didn't do as well. One source of information I read was that India has overtaken China as the largest source country in the world. I think this could be true because there were a lot of barriers to travel for people from China. But I don't want anyone to be misled that India will outpace China, because it's very, very clear that India's volumes to the US and many other destinations is only half of China, or maybe 1/3, maybe 2/3 of China. So I don't think that it's that easy for India to overtake China, though many institutions who we meet keep expecting that of us agents. The forecast for the near future is that students will visit offices, but are open to online education, counseling, sorry, but not too much. They might make their first point of contact online, but then visit an office. Most often, people yet prefer to come to the office, is what we say, but maybe instead of visiting 5 consultancies, they might meet them online or talk to them on the phone before they start walking into offices. But I see that if you have to have real closure on conversations and decisions made by students, it would be made in offices. A repeat of the last point is universities are expecting a lot more from India because of some fall in volumes from China. The market in India too is going up, but I have more statistics on that later on. One of the concerns that I have about Canada and UK is that they have taken a large number of students, but I'm not sure that their economies have come out of COVID as strongly as needed to be able to absorb that many students for part-time jobs and that many students for post-study work. So I think those markets will need to manage the expectations. USA, there has been growth in students enrolling. In fact, some institutions have had their best year in 2021. But overall, as a market, I feel there's a lot to be achieved. Institutions who are well prepared, well represented with agencies, I feel they would have had their best years, not necessarily the whole bunch of institutions in US. Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore will need to work hard. They have lost a lot of ground, and they will really need to work hard to get their brands recognition and their number of students that they need. Many of you all will know that several institutions in Australia had very heavy financial impact because they're super dependent on international student funding, and they had to let a lot of people go. They even let people go in India who work for them as representatives. So it has had a big impact. Important that I recommend that universities in USA keep, uh, as a strategy is keep using scholarships. Part-time work policies are important for students, but I guess in the US, there's limitations because of on-campus work being allowed. Uh, in certain markets, like I've heard that the wages for part-time have gone up a lot, and students are looking towards going towards those markets just so that they can earn a lot of money in part-time wages. I believe that in Canada and Australia, the part-time wages have even doubled in some parts of the country. However, the post-study work policy is very important. You all might know that Australia has relaxed their policy and allowing students to stay back for 3 years and 4 years. So it's very important about what the US government does as a policy and the availability of jobs and careers. Many universities believe that the volume of students for undergraduate from India have risen and significantly risen. When you look at this data presented by Open Doors, which is 2019 published data versus 2020, at the undergraduate level, on a base of 24,000 or 25,000 students, there's an increase in only 219 students. That's not even 1%. And we have seen numbers grow for undergraduate institutions for the US at a similar pace. So if you look at data from 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you'll probably get anywhere between 0.5% to 1% growth per year. So undergraduate education from India is not growing by leaps and bounds. This is particularly important for US institutions that choose only to partner with agencies for undergraduate placement and not for masters. I request you to look at it more closely, the data more closely, and that the volume of undergrad is going up. We do have more international schools, we have more affluence, but yet not of the magnitude of China or any other, country. That undergraduate is yet a privilege to study in the US, and it's not that easy to find those students. And if you see in this data, they constitute only 13% of the overall number of students that are coming into US. Now, if you take that from a first-time commencement program, which is 13 versus 44, it's yet 1/5, so close to 20% only. There's a lot of talk that markets in India have opened up because of the pandemic, and now rural markets have got more students interested in studying abroad. I personally do not believe in that. It's more about what agencies want universities to believe, is the way I would put it. There's no data backing it. I've looked a lot so that I could substantiate what people are saying in the market, but I haven't found any data. There would be institutions that agencies that might find it happened for them. Maybe now these people are inquiring online. Earlier they traveled to the main city, but the demand from these cities is, I feel, constant. And I feel a bit of this is being promoted because there's a bunch of new agencies which are online counseling. They want to kind of differentiate themselves from the established face-to-face agencies. So they want to say that we are reaching parts of the country that the traditional agencies did not, which I don't believe, because they have the same website and online access as the established agencies, and the established agencies also counsel students online virtually like they did throughout the pandemic. So I believe it's more, just promotion that there is a big growth in the depth of the rural market. Main cities in India continue to be the same. I've just listed them down here. which most of you all would be aware. However, the four states which I've listed below, which is Andhra Pradesh, uh, in that order, Andhra Pradesh has towns which are known as Vizag, Guntur, and Vijayawada. They are rural. Students do come from there. They've always come from there. So it's not a growth in the rural market. It's already an existing rural market. Those of you who have been traveling to India would know that very well. In the case of Maharashtra, it is the second largest source for students traveling overseas. Mumbai, Pune, and Nagpur continue to be the three main towns. Here, that's not much rural. Most of them are cities. In Punjab, there's a lot of small towns where students are traveling overseas from. However, these seem to be going more to Canada and Australia, not so many to USA. But these cities also traditionally always send students abroad. And in Gujarat, we have Anand, Ahmedabad, and Surat. We've forgotten to write Vadodara, but that's part of it too. And already students always are going overseas from those markets. The next decade, keeping in view certain statistics for India, the big hype was that we had a national education policy released in July 2020. I haven't seen anything really happen since then. So it's had, I would feel, no impact. The reason could be the pandemic, and maybe some work is happening behind the scenes, but nothing has happened on the ground. But over the years, we've seen a steady growth in the Indian middle class, and the Indian economy in the financial year 2022 is projected to grow at 9.2%, which is 9.2% GDP, which is a fairly high growth rate and exceeds several parts of the world, including China. Some other important GDP data is that the forecast is that in the year 2020, the volume of the nation's GDP would be $2.7 trillion. By 2030, it's supposed to go up about 3.5 times to 8.4 trillion. As per the research, the worst case scenario, it would be 6.8 million, which is double, 2.5 times. And in the best scenario, it might be 10 trillion. So the Indian economy is really set to grow, one of the probably best economies that we would see in the present decade. The consumption is also expected to go up from $1.3 trillion to $3 trillion, and the per capita income from $2,000 to $5,700. So there is, if you look at the money that's going to come out, there will be a significant rise in the number of students who will be able to afford to study abroad. And that linked with no real action from our national education policy should result in higher volume of students coming from India to USA. Another forecast by a research agency based out of India called Red Seer has said that Indian students would spend 75 to 85 billion US dollars annually on higher education abroad. That's a fairly large amount of money. Some more statistics is that India, which is presently the 6th largest economy in the world, by the year 2030, is expected to become the 2nd largest in Asia by surpassing Japan, and the 3rd largest in the world by surpassing Germany and UK. So if these projections are to be believed, then you all must focus a lot on recruiting students from India as much as you can. The forecast for international education increase in a way matches with volumes from India. This is research done by a company called Holon IQ. So the volume of students, they say that travel for overseas education is 5 million presently in the year 2019, and it's targeted to go to 8 million students, 60% growth in about 11-year period, and by 2030. And the total amount of money that these 5 million students spend on tuition, accommodation, food, insurance, retail, shopping, and transport and technology is currently was in the year 2019 196 billion US dollars, and that's going to go up to 433 billion dollars. So that's going up much more than the volume of students traveling, but I guess it covers for inflation. And also projected is that 80% of the growth in students traveling for international education will come from Asia, for which India would be a big part. So I'm down to my last slide. Simple SWOT analysis for the US. The strengths for the US market is the program bandwidth. No country in the world can even claim to have, I would say, even 30% or 35% of the bandwidth of programs that one can study in the US. USA has the largest capacity to accept students. We as agents are finding it difficult to place students in UK and Canada presently because the classes are full and popular programs are full. And they get, batches are full maybe 9 months and 12 months in advance sometimes. So a strength for USA is, again, the quality of education is excellent. And the economy and the industry that is there in the US is an excellent strength again. The weaknesses, as we all may already know, is the safety, that students and parents don't find the US very safe. The H-1B policy is not as attractive as Indian students would want them to be. Many of you all might have read that for an Indian to get a green card, the waiting period is about 100 years. And if you go by some ways that they calculated, it's true. So there is a need for a change in green card policy in a way whereby they allow it to be flexible depending on talent, like they do for the H-1B. And the visa process with an interview, face-to-face interview, is a weakness because students do get nervous at a visa interview, and I think good students who deserve to come over to US miss out. Some opportunities which more would be at the government level is expansion of STEM policy programs, which is already underway, but I think maybe the redefinition of STEM itself, and maybe if 3 years can become the mainstream option for OPT, it would be great, because that's what other countries are presently offering, attractive 3-year stay backs or even 2 years on 1 year stay back. There's an opportunity to build the brand because USA did go weak. The brand for USA did go weak over the last few years, especially during the last political administration. So there is need for the markets to know that USA is back and eagerly looking to receive students from India. And for those who don't work with agents or institutions that are yet on the fence to work with agents, you all will be happy to know that as per the NACAC survey jointly conducted by ARC, 49% of the institutions are working, US institutions are working with agents, and 5% more are looking at doing so. So if you're yet on the fence, it's time to get out, because these markets are dependent on agents. Whether you know it or not, students are coming in through agents. ISEF surveys have shown that about 70% students do originate from agents, but they don't disclose it. And the threats to the US market is keeping in mind, the policy between the US and China. There could be a threat for the volume of students coming in from China. So it's right that many institutions are putting the pressure on India. But what you must realize is that it will not be able to replace China. It will just grow. It will grow fast, but it's yet not going to get that big. China is increasing its education capacity, and I think is already the third largest or second largest receiver of students. And if they open up, I believe in certain parts have opened up part-time work. They might open post-study work. They will give scholarships. Their fees are extremely low. So there's a chance that the largest growth in international agent students, which is 80% coming out of Asia, part of it can go to Asia itself, to China, and not necessarily move to the rest of the world, depending on how China plays its card and its politics. So, and also always depends on what other countries do with their post-study policies. So, this is the end of my presentation, and I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll be open to questions later on. And
so I did want to go back to Sushil's presentation when he mentioned that some students might not reveal that they worked with an agency. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Faitai from Wichita State wanted to know, what do you think some of the reasons would be for that?
great. Hi, Fai, and how are you doing? So, wonderful question, and I'm so happy that you put it in the Q&A up front, so I had time to think. So, because it is a tough one. Anyway, one factor is, yes, they do not disclose that they work with students coming from an agency when they're applying to institutions that don't partner with agencies. So if you're going to, most often the higher ranked institutions, the Ivy Leagues, where they do not work with agents, students visit an agent, they get essays written and letter of recommendations written, and several other application form completely filled up, and maybe much more than that is done by the agent. So they definitely will not disclose it to those institutions. However, your concern is when you already have a partnership and several people in the marketplace, why would they not work with an agent? Or why not disclose? Because every agent doesn't represent your institution and every institution. There are so many agents who don't. And there are certain people or kind of agents who pride themselves as student counselors. They don't want to work by the commission model. And they, however, when they make an application, they would not disclose that they made it. So they are the agents that charge the student a fee. So those are the type of agents like they will not be disclosed. So there could be good agents putting genuinely good work, but they're not commissionable. So they're not disclosing their identity. And there could be bad agents who are preparing documentation, fake documentation and things like that, who will not be disclosed. So those always will exist. However, when there are sufficient number of agents in the marketplace and there's good penetration, you'll always know, because when the commissions are there to be claimed, everyone would always try to establish that the student was recruited by them. I hope that answers your question, Faitai.
Sushil, would you like to add anything to talk about student transfer, immediate transfer, financial difficulties? And I think this whole perception of what I've heard a lot from institutions is there's sometimes the students have a perception that they get a visa if they enroll in a certain school, but they really want to go to another school for a variety of reasons. It could be because their family or friends are there, or the weather, or it could be finances to save some money to transfer to a less expensive institution. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm not too much of an expert in those markets, but I've heard a lot from institutions who I work with, and they've often mentioned that it's about the fees. And like Jennifer said, the students, when they're applying for a visa, they want a good brand institution, they want a high, branded program. And actually the bottom of line problem is the funds are not sufficient. They want to go to lower budget institutions, they want to go to lower budget community colleges. They actually want to work in neighborhoods with family or stay in neighborhoods with family and friends. So they will transfer out. And the only thing that an institution can do is some kind of a fee deterrent, fee payment. There's one institution that had very interestingly made it that the second semester tuition fee is to be paid in advance, and the first semester when the student arrives. So in a way, this university is taking a full year's fee in advance, and money is one of the few ways that you can lock in. I know you might be forced by consumer rights to refund some monies. So then institutions again put a higher administrative fee and than normal, so that the amounts to be refunded are lower. But it is an actual fact of students out of Nepal and Bangladesh that they will transfer out for lower cost institutions.
Thank you.